I want you to take yourself back to January 2020.
Okay.
It's the middle of the night. You glance at your phone, and the notifications are just stacking up. 16 ballistic missiles launched.
Right.
Target, U.S. military bases in Iraq. I vividly remember that moment. The air just left the room. It felt like we were watching the first domino fall.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, in a chain that ends with World War III, you look at that headline and you think, okay, this is it. The rationality is gone, the gloves are off, and we are spiraling.
It certainly felt like the precipice of a catastrophe. The fog of war was, incredibly thick that night.
Totally.
But that's why this deep dive is so fascinating to me. Because when you strip away the panic and the breaking news banners, and you look at the raw military data, which is what we're doing today, you see a completely different story.
A different story, how?
You don't see a blind, uncontrollable outburst of rage. You see what the analysts in our source material call a masterpiece of calibration.
Calibration, that's such a cold mathematical word for giant explosives raining down on the desert.
It is.
But that contrast is the hook for me. We are analyzing the Iranian response to the death of General Qasem Soleimani. And the sources you've pulled, they don't read like typical war reporting.
No, they don't.
They read like game theory.
Because that's what it was. This wasn't just a battle. It was a high-stakes geopolitical equation.
Right.
The central question the sources are trying to answer is arguably the most difficult problem in modern warfare. How do you launch a massive, overt military strike against a superpower, the United States, without actually committing suicide by triggering a total war?
It sounds like a paradox. You're punching a giant and hoping he doesn't punch back.
Or rather, you're punching him in a very specific way that signals you don't want to keep fighting.
So our mission today is to unpack that strategy. We're going to look at the deterrence triangle, which I found to be a mind-blowing concept,
Yeah.
and we're going to look at the risk window where everything could have gone wrong.
Definitely.
But before we get to the missiles, we have to talk about the man himself, General Soleimani.
We have to. You can't understand the reaction without understanding the loss.
The sources make a really interesting distinction here. I think in the West, we saw him as a general, a guy with stars on his shoulder who commands troops.
Mm-hmm.
But the analysis describes him as architecture, not a person, but a structure. That feels like a heavy distinction.
It's the most important distinction. Calling Soleimani a general is a massive understatement of his actual function.
Okay.
He wasn't just commanding troops. He was the architect of Iran's entire regional foreign policy. Over 2 decades, he built this personal, intricate network of influence across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen.
The axis of resistance.
Right. But think about how that operates. It's not just official treaties. It's personal loyalty. It's, funding channels. It's operational coordination. Soleimani was the hub.
The linchpin.
He was the structural integrity of that entire web. So when the U.S. killed him, they didn't just remove a piece from the board.
No.
They effectively smashed the board.
Which explains the pressure. I was reading the section on the immediate aftermath, and the descriptions of the funerals were intense. We saw the footage, millions of people in the streets.
Incredible scenes.
It wasn't just mourning, it was a demand for action.
And that demand created an existential crisis for the Iranian leadership. This brings us to the core conflict in our sources.
Which is?
Usually, Iran's military doctrine is all about layered deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
They prefer the shadows. They fight asymmetrically using proxies, militias, cyber attacks, things that offer plausible deniability.
Right, the classic, it wasn't us, it was some rogue group strategy.
Exactly. They do that because they know they cannot win a conventional head-to-head war with the U.S. military.
Of course.
But the killing of Soleimani broke the rules. It was too big, too public. The regime couldn't hide in the shadows this time.
So they have to step into the spotlight. But this is where the deterrence triangle comes in. This was the part of the reading that really made me stop and think.
It's a fantastic framework.
The sources lay out this framework called the deterrence triangle to explain how Tehran decided what to do. Can we break that down? Because it seems like they were being pulled in 3 totally different directions.
They were being squeezed. So imagine a triangle. Point 1 is domestic legitimacy. This is crucial. The regime's survival depends on projecting strength to its own people.
Mm-hmm.
After Soleimani's death, the public humiliation was severe. If the leadership did nothing or something weak, they risked looking impotent at home. That leads to instability.
Okay, so point 1 is we have to look strong for our own people.
Point 2 is regional influence. This connects back to Soleimani's network. Iran relies on proxies in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria. If Iran allows its top commander to be killed without a serious response, those proxies lose faith.
They start to doubt.
They start thinking, if they can't protect Soleimani, they can't protect us. Iran's regional power just crumbles.
Because they have to hit back hard to prove they are still the big dog in the region. But then there's point 3.
Avoidance of full-scale war. This is the hard wall. They know that if they trigger a full-blown conventional war with the United States, they lose. The regime likely collapses.
And this is the trap. To satisfy point 1 and 2, legitimacy and influence, they need a massive strike.
A huge strike.
But a massive strike triggers point 3, total war. It's a nightmare scenario.
It is the ultimate Goldilocks problem. Too soft, you lose your country from the inside.
Right.
Too hard, you lose your country from the outside. They needed a solution that was just right.
And the solution was 16 ballistic missiles. But let's look at how they did it, because the how is where the calibration really shines. The sources emphasize that this was theatrical.
Oh, incredibly theatrical. First, look at the publicity. State television broadcast the launches. They released footage of the missiles rising on pillars of fire.
They wanted everyone to see it.
They wanted the world to see the Iranian flag on those rockets.
Which goes back to that symmetry concept the source talks about. Why not use the proxies? Why not just have a militia in Iraq fire a few mortars?
Because the U.S. strike was overt. The President of the United States went on TV and took credit. He owned it.
Okay.
Symmetry dictates that an overt attack on a state figure requires an overt response from the state itself. If Iran had used a proxy, it would have signaled fear. It would have looked like they were hiding behind their little brothers.
So they had to put their name on the receipt.
They had to. But here is the genius of the calibration. While the launch was loud and public, the targeting was surgically precise in its restraint.
The source mentions they targeted Ain al-Assad and Erbil. These are major bases.
Big bases.
But the details.
They avoided the barracks.
They hit military infrastructure, hangars, equipment, runways. They studiously avoided the areas with high concentrations of personnel. And the most incredible part, the back channel.
This is the part that sounds like fiction. The idea that you would tell your enemy you are about to punch them.
The report indicates warnings were passed indirectly through Swiss channels and the Iraqi government hours before the strike.
Hours. They essentially said, we are launching. The missiles are coming. Get your people into the bunkers.
Why give away the element of surprise? That's military strategy 101, isn't it? Surprise is everything.
Not when your goal is signaling, not destruction. If they wanted to kill Americans, they would have kept quiet. But remember the deterrence triangle. They needed to show strength, which is launching the missiles without causing mass casualties that would force the U.S. to invade. Avoiding war.
So the message wasn't, we're going to kill you. The message was, what?
The message was twofold. First, we can reach you. We have the technology, the guidance systems, and the daring to hit your bases.
Okay, that's clear.
Second, and more importantly, we choose the scale. We could have killed 50 people tonight. We chose not to. We are de-escalating by showing you what we could do, but didn't.
That is a staggering level of communication to attempt with ballistic missiles. I'm shooting at you to show you I don't want to fight.
It's a language of violence, but a very precise grammar.
But let's talk about the constraints. Why did they feel they had to stop there? The source mentions military reality and economic reality.
Yes.
And I feel like the economic part gets overlooked in the action movie version of this story.
It's huge. You have to look at the context of 2020. The maximum pressure campaign of sanctions had strangled the Iranian economy. Inflation was rampant. Oil exports were down. The country was financially fragile.
And war is expensive.
War is incredibly expensive, not just in ammo, but in the complete shutdown of trade. A full war would have broken the Iranian economy overnight. The leadership knew they couldn't afford a protracted conflict.
And the military reality.
U.S. air superiority. The source is very blunt about this. Iran has a strong missile program, but their air force and air defenses are not a match for the U.S.
Not even close.
In a full war, the U.S. would likely target strategic assets, oil refineries, nuclear sites, command and control. Iran's leadership is rational. They knew their strategic infrastructure was vulnerable.
So the objective was never victory in the traditional sense.
No. The source defines the objective as narrative control. They needed to control the story. They needed the headline, Iran strikes back. Without the headline, Iran destroyed.
It sounds so neat when we look back at it now. Oh, they threaded the needle.
Right.
But reading the section on the risk window gave me anxiety. This wasn't a sure thing. This was a massive gamble.
It's a terrifying gamble. Think about the variables involved. We're talking about 16 ballistic missiles. flying hundreds of miles. These are machines.
Things go wrong.
Guidance systems fail. Motors malfunction.
What if one of those missiles drifted? What if it hit a crowded barracks instead of an empty hangar?
That's the risk window. If that strike kills 50 Americans, the calibration fails. It doesn't matter what the intent was. Washington would have been forced, politically and militarily, to respond with overwhelming force.
And on the flip side, what if Washington just misread the signal? What if the U.S. radar operators saw 16 incoming missiles and thought, this is the first wave of a nuclear attack, or they're targeting cities?
Then, the U.S. counterstrike might have launched before the Iranian missiles even landed.
Wow.
Iran was betting the existence of their regime on the assumption that the U.S. would A, read the signal correctly, and B, exercise restraint.
And the U.S. did. The attack happened, the bunkers held, no one died, and the U.S. effectively paused. But, and this is the dark twist in the story, while the external gamble paid off, the internal situation collapsed. The source spends a lot of time on the tragedy of Flight 752.
This is the bitter irony of the entire operation. You have this sophisticated, high-level strategic masterpiece of missile calibration.
Right.
And then in the high-tension hours immediately following the strike, while everyone is watching the skies for U.S. bombers, an Iranian air defense operator makes a mistake.
The fog of war again?
He mistakes a civilian airliner taking off from Tehran for an incoming cruise missile. He fires.
And kills 176 people, many of them Iranians.
It undoes everything. Look at the deterrence triangle again. Remember, domestic legitimacy.
Yeah.
The missile strike against the U.S. was supposed to boost that. It was supposed to make the people proud and united.
But shooting down your own passenger plane.
That shattered the legitimacy.
The source talks about the credibility costs.
It was devastating. First, they denied it. Then, when the evidence came out, they had to admit it. The same crowds that were mourning Soleimani and chanting against America were suddenly in the streets protesting their own government's incompetence.
It's such a tragic juxtaposition. On one hand, you have this perfect execution of a ballistic missile strike. On the other, a catastrophic failure of basic air defense coordination.
It demonstrates the limits of controlled escalation. You can plan the strategy to boardroom, but once you put weapons on high alert, you introduce human error. And human error in that environment is lethal.
So while they managed the external threat, they kept the U.S. from invading, the broader crisis exposed these deep internal vulnerabilities. They won the narrative abroad, but lost it at home.
Precisely. They survived the moment, but the cost was much higher than just the missiles they fired.
So as we wrap this up, how do we summarize this event? It feels like more than just a footnote in history.
The source argues that this event redefined the rules of engagement. Iran proved it could strike the U.S. directly and survive, provided it followed the rules of calibration.
Right.
It was about positioning, it was about surviving the moment without surrendering status.
It's a terrifying kind of stability. I promise to only hurt you a little bit so you don't have to kill me.
That is the essence of modern deterrence. It's not about peace, it's about managed violence.
This leaves me with a really provocative thought to end on. We spend so much time obsessing over the technology of war, the hypersonic missiles, the drones, the cyber warfare. But in this story, the most important weapon on both sides was actually restraint.
Restraint and communication.
But here is the scary question that you, the listener, need to sit with. In this specific case, the signals were read correctly. The text message sent via ballistic missile was understood by the White House. But how sustainable is that?
It's a huge question.
How long can global peace rely on our enemies correctly reading our signals amidst the noise of a crisis?
And what happens when the calibration is off by just 1 degree?
Exactly. What happens when the message gets lost in the mail? That's something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. Thanks for helping us unpack this massive topic.
It was a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one. Stay curious.